A show created by the fans, for the fans. We are your home for Ohio State football coverage all year long. The Scarlet and Gray Podcast, a Network 216 production. Live weekdays on the Network 216 YouTube channel. Send us all your questions and comments on Twitter at @VSG_podcast. Now, here are your hosts, Tyler Johnson, Jordan Dalton, and Nick Leisure.
Good evening, Buckeye Nation, and welcome to episode number 52 of this. I lose track sometimes of the Scarlet and Gray Podcast. I am Tyler Johnson, joined by Mr. Nick Leisure. Jordan Dalton will not be with us tonight. I know he and his wife have been battling a stomach bug recently, so really hoping they feel better. But Nick, how you doing tonight, my man?
Good, man. Good. Got some snow flurries rolling around tonight, so it's like, come on, man. I thought we were over that time of the year, but nevertheless, I guess that's why we live in the great state of Ohio. But, yeah, I mean, great show tonight. I got another great guest lined up. Get to talk about some team out west again, so pretty excited about this one tonight.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. And, yeah, I'm sick of the snow. I'm done with the snow. I mean, we are in now the middle of March, and I'm seeing snow actually stick to the ground. Like, just give me a break. But you kind of mentioned we got another great guest tonight. Before we get to him, of course, as a reminder, guys, we just ask if you would take that quick second, drop a like on tonight's video. We really would appreciate that. It's completely, of course, free to like the video, free to subscribe. And also just thank you guys for the support you've given us. Recently, the Aaron Nolan interview was huge. We can't thank you guys enough for that. But also, Nick McLaughlin, your new punter. I mean, that was a fun interview and a lot of good support there. But also, James Williams last week. That was awesome from previewing UCLA. So thank you guys so much for that support. We hope you guys show that support tonight with our great guests that we're going to have. And as always, Network 216 and the Scarlet and Gray Podcast is proud to be a partner with Homage Athletic Apparel. And I'm wearing a special shirt tonight. Yeah, it's Cleveland Browns, but there's a reason why I'm wearing this. Denzel Ward actually partnered with Homage for the Make Them Know Your Name Foundation. And basically what this is a certain amount of the proceedings from the shirt that you see me wearing. That helps raise more awareness for heart disease, which is how Denzel Ward's father passed away due to cardiac arrest. So, again, go to homage.com, go get your shirt. It's an awesome thing that you guys can do as far as supporting Denzel Ward, supporting this awesome foundation, because I'm sure some of us have dealt with the same exact thing with other family members, and we know people that have. So go check it out, homage.com. We're going to bring in our guests now. We are going to be covering the Oregon Ducks tonight. Arguably, some would say, the biggest threat to Ohio State winning the Big Ten championship this year. We're going to bring in Mr. Spencer McLaughlin. He is the host of Locked On Ducks and also the host of Locked On Pac-12. Spencer, how are you doing tonight?
Formerly Locked On Pac-12, now Locked On College Football, RIP Pac, but still got the two channels working to be sure. But great to be on with you guys. Thanks for having me.
Anytime. Thank you so much for joining us, Nick. I'm going to give the floor to you, my man. This first question, it was quite a topic for a couple days after Nick Saban retired. So let's go ahead and get into that.
Yeah. So again, thanks, Spence, for your time. I know you're pretty busy. So I just wanted to touch on Dan Lanning really quick. I know as soon as Nick Saban announced his retirement from being the head coach over at Alabama, there was a bunch of smoke, whether there was any truth to it or not. That's kind of my question. I just didn't know, was there any validity to Dan Lanning possibly leaving to go be the head coach at Alabama, or was he going to be an Oregon Duck this whole time?
Well, he made it pretty clear with his statement that he wants to remain an Oregon Duck, and that made us Oregon fans happy because I think this Dan Lanning guy is pretty good at coaching football and recruiting and the like. But, when that first happened, my first thought was, oh my gosh, when Saban retired, that is, they're gonna go after Lanning. In the sports books, that's not always an indicator per se, but they had Lanning as the favorite right off the bat, and that then quickly receded. And I don't know if the Lanning camp expressed outright interest in the Alabama job. I do know for a fact, and was told by somebody who knows the Alabama situation, that there was interest in lining up behind Dan Lanning as Alabama's next coach. That is where they wanted to go, but Lanning has decided, of course, to stay with Oregon. And so I know that the Alabama interest was real. I assume Lanning picked up the phone, had a conversation, took a phone. I don't know if he picked up the phone. That's just me assuming. But, the Alabama interest was real, and then that receded. And then the next guy they had as the favorite at one point in time was Kalen DeBoer. And that, of course, turned out to be where Alabama went with their coaching search. So, yeah, I mean, that was definitely a nervous time for Duck fans. Anytime an SEC job comes open, I think Lanning's name is going to get tossed around. It was for Auburn, it was for Texas A&M, and it was for Alabama. And through all three of those coaching searches, Oregon's been able to retain him, not just because they have the willingness to pay a high-level coach and recruiter, but because Lanning, I think, legitimately likes being at Oregon. And it's the first time he's ever been a head coach. And, his actions are backing up his words of he places great value on a university that gave him his first head coaching opportunity. So I think he can be with Oregon as long as he'd like to be, because when you recruit the way that he does, you can only have such a bad year. And what I mean by that is, with the amount of talent they have, I think Texas A&M is just a colossal mismanagement of coaching with the roster talent that they had. But even Texas A&M, until the 5-7 year, they were having underperforming seasons at 7-5, 8-4. That's the worst you should ever be able to do. So as long as the recruiting and player acquisition in the portal maintains, and I fully expect it to be, and in fact only go up if Oregon's able to get some really high-profile wins and thrive in the Big Ten, then I think that Lanning has just got a very, very high floor and a high ceiling as a head coach with Oregon.
That's actually a really good follow-up to that is, do you think Oregon coming to the Big Ten had any impact on that potential decision? Because, again, staying in the Pac-12, we knew about the possible expansion. It ended up happening, of course. Do you think that had anything to do with this decision? Is look at what you're coming to in the Big Ten. You're now going to be – you already have a premier program, but now it's going to be in the Big Ten. It's going to be in one of the best conferences in college football now. And really, the Big Ten and the SEC are the two big conferences now. So do you think that played into his decision at all?
Yeah, I do. And, I'm not somebody who cares for all the realignment. I think it's nonsense and crap and tearing at the fabric of what makes college football great. And I could give you 2.5 hours on that if you'd like. But I don't think that's what we have in mind with my appearance here today. So I'll just keep it to I don't care for Oregon going into the Big Ten overall. I think they had to go there. You look at the finances of what they would have made in the Pac-12 with, the Apple deal. And they could have ended up making a decent amount of money. Still, even if it had gone well with the number of subscribers to, the Pac-12 on Apple TV, that wouldn't have matched what they will eventually get in the Big Ten. And I don't ever worry about Oregon's finances as long as Phil Knight and Nike are around to support the Ducks in their athletic department. So, I didn't think that was a huge factor, but I knew it was a factor. But I think the pedigree is the biggest thing for Lanning as a coach. The Pac-12, if you look back on, what it would have been had just Colorado left and had everyone taken the Apple deal, you would have had a league with Oregon and Washington and Utah as your headline programs. Jonathan Smith probably stays at Oregon State, and Jed Fish is still down at Arizona. That'd be a really good conference. I think that would be pretty solidly the third best conference in the country for football. And if you're talking about having high-end programs, but would it have been the second best? No. And that's where the Big Ten comes into play. So I think it certainly helped. I don't think it was the only factor. If Oregon had stayed and the Pac-12 had stayed together, I think there's still a pretty good chance that Lanning would have stayed at Oregon. But I don't think it's quite as likely because of the money, the exposure, and the pedigree. Those are three things that certainly factor into how successful you can be as a head coach. I think Oregon's brand would have been able to transcend the obstacles a lot of other Pac schools might have faced, particularly with the finances. But I think going to the Big Ten kind of helps seal the deal that, Oregon's the place that Dan Lanning wants to be as a head coach.
And Oregon, of course, they've been really good under Dan Lanning. They're coming to the Big Ten, and we believe that is the biggest threat to Ohio State. This Ohio State team, there's no way to put it. We're absolutely loaded. We're bringing back everybody. So you should be a favorite, and every year Ohio State should be a favorite. But coming in, Oregon has an opportunity to really make some noise in the Big Ten, potentially even win the Big Ten their first year in the conference. But they're going to have to overcome some tough losses, and then we'll get to who they brought in. But they did lose Bo Nix. They're losing Bucky Irving. They're losing Troy Franklin. I mean, they are losing some really talented players. It's easy to say that Bo Nix is the biggest loss that they're going to have. But outside of Bo Nix, who's going to be the hardest player for the Ducks to replace?
That's a great question. I think an under-the-radar selection here is Brandon Dorlus. And Brandon Dorlus was an all-conference defensive lineman for the last couple of years for the Ducks. He announced his return, ahead of last season, and that was a huge, huge move for the Ducks, front four. And Oregon's lost a lot of players on the interior of that defensive line. It's the biggest question going into spring football is, which of their blue chip redshirt freshmen from the 2023 class or true freshmen in the 2024 class are going to be ready to step up and play a key role along that defensive line? And the answer is we don't know. That's something that is going to be decided. I think that Troy Franklin is probably the best receiver Oregon's had in my lifetime. He just had the best receiving season Oregon has ever seen. Quite literally, he set the single season record for reception yards and touchdowns, and he had the receptions record, but then he opted out of the Fiesta Bowl. Tez Johnson played. Tez Johnson's returning for the Ducks, and Tez Johnson actually caught like 7 or 8 passes in that game and went past Franklin, and he set the Oregon single season receptions record. But, when the regular season came to a close and Oregon lost that Pac-12 title game, unfortunately, Franklin had all 3 of those records in 1 year. So, that's probably the best individual season, and that's a huge loss. There's no doubt about it. But bringing in a guy like Evan Stewart, who is poised to have a just massive year, he doesn't even have to be on Troy Franklin's level necessarily because their receiving core is really good, really deep, really experienced, explosive, and dynamic. I like everything about their wide receivers. I think that Evan Stewart kind of helps lessen that loss a little bit. And then you look at Bucky Irving, who was a really good running back, all Pac-12 second team this past year, and was, I think, honorable mention or might have even been first team. His first, I might have that crossed up. He's been in all conference selection each of the last 2 years with the Ducks. It's all flying around in my head and whatnot. But you lose that guy, but you insert a guy in Jordan James who at times, not exclusively, but at times, looked better than Bucky Irving this year. They have different styles, but in the Pac-12 championship game, you ask any Oregon fan that was really paying attention, and they'll tell you that, yeah, Jordan James should have gotten more touches. Bucky was not in a good spot in that game, and Jordan James was just seeing the holes a lot better and hitting them, and his numbers were much, much better and more efficient in that game. So I don't think there's really much of a drop-off with Jordan James and then Noah Whittington coming back, who was ahead of Jordan James on the depth chart last year. When the season began, he gets hurt, James steps up, and James ends up leading the Pac-12 in average yards per carry at about 7.9, and he's the highest graded returning running back on PFF in the entire country. And he was even higher graded than Irving last year. So not by a lot, but by just, a little bit. So I don't think there's going to be much of a drop-off with the running back position. I think your drop-off at the receiver spot is pretty subtle. I think your quarterback drop-off it's there, but I mean, I just recorded a show for tomorrow with Max Chadwick of PFF, and he's even higher on Dylan Gabriel than I am. Like, I like Gabriel. I think Gabriel is good. He's a guy who last year, 3,600 yards, 30 touchdowns, 6 picks. He ran for almost 500 yards and some scores. I think it was 12. That might be too high. I'd have to double check. But he's a guy that, I think he's good, solid, capable. If he's your quarterback, Oregon could win a national championship. Max of PFF came on and said, yeah, I think this guy could be in New York for the Heisman. I think he could put up almost the same numbers that Bo Nix did. And I don't think that, and I like the guy. So, again, there's a drop-off at those spots. I think the running back is a wash. I think you got a slight drop at receiver, a slight drop at quarterback. But along the defensive line, Brandon Dorlus, I don't think there's someone who, they brought in Jamari Caldwell from Houston, second team All Big 12. You're playing in a much better conference in the trenches than the Big 12, especially last year, this season for Oregon going into the Big 10. So I don't know if Caldwell can be that Dorlus type player. Dorlus was one of the leaders in the country in quarterback pressures. And, getting pressure on the quarterback has been a hit or miss proposition for the Ducks. So I think Dorlus is arguably the biggest loss that Oregon had last year. He's not the one that is necessarily the flashiest, but he was so disruptive and so explosive with his playmaking ability on the interior. And I think that you're now asking a lot of young guys to step up and try and replace that production. And that's just asking a lot. So I think more than those spots, though I don't expect Gabriel to be as good as Nix or Stewart as good as Franklin, I think the drop off from Dorless to this incoming group of freshmen who are talented, you can't expect him to be as good as Dorless right away.
And Oregon brought in 2 quarterbacks through the transfer portal, which, I mean, I'll admit, because we were talking about it back and forth off air when the transfer portal was just going absolutely insane. And we were like, it's interesting because they had Oregon has Ty Johnson, who is a highly rated recruit.
Ty Thompson,
clearly, yeah. Ty Thompson, my apologies. But they had a highly rated recruit there. And then clearly they still liked Dante Moore. But when it comes to Dante Moore, why did Oregon make this particular move as opposed to sticking with a guy like Ty Thompson that's already been into the program?
It's a very unique situation. I don't know of another team that brought in a quarterback for this year and just one quarterback who's almost certainly going to be a starter next year. Now, Ohio State's the only other one that's comparable, right? You guys bring in Julian Sayin in addition to Will Howard, and you already have Aaron Noland in the room, and then Devin Brown is in there as well. It's like, well, that's a lot of talent at quarterback, and everybody can't play. So, I think for the Ducks, they brought in Dante Moore because there was a prior relationship with Dan Lanning and Dante Moore. He was verbally committed to the Ducks. Then when Dillingham left to ASU, he decommitted, went to UCLA, didn't work out the way he was hoping, and so he's coming back to Oregon and has been adamant that he wants to develop. He wants to work to be better so that he can prepare. I had the chance to talk to him before he committed anywhere, and when I asked him about his future plans, he said one of the biggest things that's a priority for him is a path to the NFL. That is a high priority issue for him, or not issue per se, but that's just kind of the way he's thinking. Is where can I go that's going to put me in the NFL? Well, you look at what Will Stein has done in his first year as Oregon's OC. Bo Nix's draft stock definitely took a jump. Even after a great first year with the Ducks, it's even higher because of what he did with Will Stein. You look at what he did at UTSA in his last year there as the OC. Frank Harris was one of the leading passers in all of college football. So I think he sees the familiarity with Dan Lanning, the weapons that Oregon has, and the offensive coordinator that the Ducks have in place. And those 3 factors line up for him to make it work to where, okay, I can sit this year and come in behind a veteran quarterback, right? So all those things line up for him to maximize his NFL opportunities. And then for the Ducks, well, if you're going to get a guy of that talent, of course you are, right? I mean, of course you are. Even if he's going to have to sit for a year, if he's willing to do that, well, that's perfect. That's perfect. He might have been doing, he probably would have been doing that anyway had he committed to the Ducks or had he stayed committed to the Ducks right out of high school. So I think it's just worked out for both sides. It's definitely unique and interesting, but Moore is someone who, if you can maximize and unlock his potential, crazy arm talent.
Yeah, absolutely. And really the final question here before we wrap things up, we love to ask our guests this with their teams because we like to get a sense of what the thought is with the team this year. Like, obviously, we spoke with James last week about UCLA. Thinks it's going to be a little bit of a struggle, but they still might surprise some people in the Big Ten. With Oregon,
no, they won't.
What if you have to make a record prediction? Where do you think the Ducks end up finishing this year in the Big Ten?
Yeah, I think they're at least a 10-win team, and I would say their win total, Vegas is goated, obviously, but their win total of 10.5 could not be more spot on. I mean, could not be more spot on, because I think if this team wins 9 games, that's a massive disappointment. Massive disappointment. And that would require coaching and quarterback just malfeasance and mismanagement in both areas. I think that their ceiling is 12 games. I don't expect them to hit that between, at Michigan, hosting Ohio State. Washington's always going to give you fits, and hopefully Dan Lanning can kind of, get that out of the way and finally beat Washington, because that's really the only thing in addition to a conference title or a playoff appearance that Oregon fans are missing with him. It's like, dude, you got to beat Washington. But Kalen DeBoer's not there. Jed Fish is a very good coach, but he's not Kalen DeBoer. And I think Washington will be solid, but Oregon at home should absolutely win that game. But I think between all of those matchups, going at Wisconsin, you can never sleep on that. I'm sure you guys are aware Madison can be a tough place to walk away with a win. You might win, but it might not feel very good afterwards. I've seen plenty of those games play out in front of the Badger faithful there at Camp Randall. So I think that 10 to 11 wins is what I'm looking for, just right on that win total. And as long as Oregon's got double digits, I think they'll be in the playoff, and I think that's a successful season. But that's the standard. That's where Oregon fans are at. Very similar to Ohio State. If the Ducks were to make the Big Ten title game and lose, but make the playoff, I don't think Oregon fans would be very upset about that. That's why I don't like the expanded playoff. But hey, who am I? So I think that for Oregon, that's where the expectation is. Very similar to Ohio State. If Ohio State won 9 games this year, how would you guys feel?
Yeah. I'm firing Ryan. I'm firing Ryan Day. I'm done.
I'm not going that far. I'm not saying 9-3 is going to get Dan Lanning the boot in my view, but with the way that the schedule lines up, getting Ohio State at home and Michigan on the road, when Michigan's going to be a pullback team and Ohio State's really good, that's a huge break. That's a huge break, and then they moved out of the Texas A&M or Texas Tech game so that they could play Oregon State in the game formerly and now once again known as the Civil War, which I'm all in favor of. And Oregon State will be solid, but you should win that game. Oregon State probably won't be as good as last year, and Oregon will be close to as good as last year, and Oregon beat them 31-7 last year. But the Ducks are also 0-2 in their last 2 trips to research, so you never know. But yeah, I think anything 10 wins or above, I'll be happy with that, and that should get Oregon into the playoff as well in the Big Ten.
So this will actually be the final one. It always comes down to Ohio State, Michigan at the end of the year normally for who is going to either represent the Big Ten, even though there's no division anymore, who would represent the Big Ten East in the Big Ten championship game. Do you think it's going to be between Ohio State and Oregon? Do you think that game in Eugene will determine ultimately who ends up probably winning the Big Ten?
Without divisions, no, I don't think so. You look at what Oregon and Washington did last year, I think it's very similar. Oregon went up to Seattle, lost by 3 points because we just can't find a good, reliable kicker, and I don't know that anybody else can. But I watch a lot of other teams make field goals, so I don't know. Maybe it's just an Oregon thing. But Oregon loses that game, but then meets Washington again in the Pac-12 title game. I think that could absolutely play out where you have one team that goes 12-0 and one team that goes 11-1, or both teams go 11-1 and the tiebreakers work out. Like Ohio State, you guys have Notre Dame on your schedule, right?
Not this year. No.
Not this year. Okay. Who's your guys' non-conference slate?
Our schedule's super soft this year.
It's ridiculous. We don't play anybody at all. I mean, it's bad. I don't know what happened. I think the year after we play Texas or something, but no one this year.
Okay, so I still think you could see Ohio State lose to maybe a Michigan that's got 2 or 3 losses, and they find a way to win the rivalry game, or maybe they lose to Oregon, but Oregon loses to somebody else, but the tiebreakers work at, or Penn State I think is going to be a good team this year in the Big Ten for sure. Oregon doesn't play Penn State. The tiebreakers, which by the way, as I understand it, haven't been released yet for the new, they've been withholding that information. I don't really know why. I don't know what they're waiting for. I get questions from people on my show all the time like, hey, what are the tiebreakers? And I'm just scouring the internet. I'm like,
I don't know.
Is this just not available? Are these trade secrets? What are we? I don't know what we're waiting for here. I guess they're still drafting all of that stuff up, or maybe they're waiting for the Big Ten moves to be official on July 1st. I don't know. I really don't know what the holdup there is. But no, I don't think the loser of that game on October 12th, which is probably going to be the biggest game in all of college football that week, I don't think that team is out of the conference championship hunt. Certainly they won't be out of the playoff hunt. But, as for making it to Indianapolis, I don't think that's going to be, what decides whether or not, maybe, but I doubt it.
Well, Spencer, we really appreciate your time this evening. Before we let you go, just plug all your work. Let everyone know where they can find all your content on the Oregon Ducks and just college football in general.
Yeah, so I host Locked On Ducks and Locked On College Football Monday through Friday on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts all year round. And I'm on X, formerly known as Twitter, at @McLaughlinCFB. If you want to drop me a note and say I'm an idiot or say that I'm great, I'm here for both of them, frankly. I'll be smiling either way. One will be a chuckle and one will be a, oh, that's nice.
Well, thank you so much again for joining us. We really appreciate it and hope to connect with you, of course, game week when Ohio State travels to Eugene to take on Oregon.
Yeah, gosh, that should be
Blockbuster.
that should be a big game. I won't be there, unfortunately. I'll have to watch it on TV like everybody else. I do play-by-play for Southern Utah. That's what that Thunderbird logo is right there. And so we've got a football game that day, and my fingers are just crossed that the games aren't at the same time. Like last year, Oregon and Utah games were that game was at the same time as the Southern Utah game. So I'm like watching during commercial breaks, and then I hear my producer count me down, and I'm like, oh, okay, we're back. Then I call the game, and then like if there's a break in the action, I'll just like swipe down and look and see what the score is, and then I'll get back to the action and whatnot. I don't want to do that for Oregon, Ohio State. I want to sit down, I want to enjoy the game, and then then call the Southern Utah game separately. So hopefully it all works out.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, once again, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time this evening.
Yeah, appreciate it, guys. Go Ducks.
Yeah, yep. Thank you so much. That was Spencer McLaughlin from Locked On Ducks and Locked On College Football. Nick, as we're wrapping things up, man, I mean, I think our opinion is still the same. Oregon is going to be the team. Listen, it's nothing against Michigan, but of course we know they're losing a lot. New head coach, a lot of new coaching staff. They're losing a ton of players. But Oregon, man, is coming in. I mean, they're going to be locked and loaded, and they have just talent across the board.
Yeah, I mean, like we've talked off air, on air, I mean, Oregon's definitely going to be the team to beat other than Ohio State, I think, in the Big Ten. And I still think it's wild, though, now that we're talking about the Big Ten championship game, how that's still in Indianapolis with the expansion out west. I'm sure that'll be altered eventually. But, they're going to have a great year. Dylan Gabriel is probably going to be one of the best quarterbacks in college football next year. So, and then they got Dante Moore right behind him, ready to go. So, I mean, Spencer, I mean, you've really hit it on the head of these last two guests, dude. They've been very informative, and it's always nice when you can get a bunch of information from behind enemy lines.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I didn't even need to ask him key players. I mean, he went right into that without me even saying anything, man. That was perfect. And I mean, dude, Oregon, they're going to be tough. There's no doubt about it. I mean, that game, kind of like you mentioned in Eugene,
blockbuster.
It's going to be absolutely incredible. But as we're wrapping things up, real quick, we do want to cover this because a little piece of Ohio State news. There's conflicting reports out there that Ohio State is going to interview Oklahoma running back coach DeMarco Murray. A lot of people might recognize that name, former NFL running back. And then from another source told me, very reliable, that he's not interviewing for the job. So I don't know what's what. We saw Ohio State insiders report that he was interviewing, and then got a message today, like I said, from someone really reliable that said he's not. So I guess we'll find out. I don't know, but you guys just want to make sure you're subscribed to Twitter at the SG_podcast. We're looking for a new running back coach. There's going to be a lot of reports that are going to come out here over the coming days, coming week, hopefully not weeks. But just make sure you guys are keeping an eye on it. But real quick, man, what were your thoughts on DeMarco Murray? I mean, does that move sound good to you? I mean, it's an upgrade over Tony Alford. I mean, personally, I'm intrigued with it. This is a guy that's recruited at a high level for a number of years, former NFL running back, brings the pedigree. I think, if anything, it almost is an upgrade.
Yeah, I mean, it gives you some youth. He's definitely – Tony Alford definitely been at Ohio State for a long time. So just gives a fresh perspective. And, I mean, that's always helpful when you're trying to handle a running back room like Ohio State has, with Quinshon Judkins and Trayvon Henderson. That's going to be a lot to handle. So maybe seeing a fresh set of eyes wouldn't be the worst thing. I'm really curious to see how they handle this week of practice. I know they're back from spring break, so spring practices should be resuming here. So I wouldn't be shocked if we probably see maybe Ryan Day helping out a little bit more with the running backs just because he's been that CEO for the first week. So probably see him a little bit more hands-on with the running backs individually. But, yeah, I mean, if you're Ohio State, you probably got to hire somebody by the end of the week, I'd imagine. That way you get them ready to go and can get some more better install and get it ready for the fall. But, yeah, I'd imagine by the end of the week they'll have their guy if they don't by midweek.
Yeah, I mean, dude, you got to get him in soon because the other big thing that you got coming up here at the end of March, got the number 1 running back in the country visiting Columbus, and he's going to be there for 4 days. He's still scheduled as of now to visit. He didn't like the fact Alford obviously decided to leave Ohio State. We'll see if that hurts. Like we'll find out at some point, but you got to have that guy there because the last thing you want is these running backs visiting Columbus and you don't have a running back coach. Like that's, you got to make sure you get that move done for sure. But
Absolutely.
Guys, as a reminder, drop a like onto tonight's video, please. We really appreciate that support. Again, you guys have been crushing it lately with the likes, the support. We've had some great guests, so thank you guys for really making us one of the homes for Ohio State football coverage. We can't thank you guys enough for that. We are going to have another. I'm telling you right now, I'm not going to tell you because we want to announce it on social media, but we are going to have another great guest next week to preview another team in the Big Ten. So the guests are lining up. Hopefully we got some more player interviews coming soon, but thank you guys so much for the support. We will talk to you all again soon. And as always, baby, go Buckeyes.